Hey everyone, welcome to the third episode of A Deeper Conversation with George and Deanna. Today we're going to be talking about the principles again, but more in the structure of how it works and how do I do it. So I'm going to let George kind of start us off on the conversation because he had some really interesting stuff to say when we were doing the prep work. So take it away, George.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's good to be here again. During the last episode, we were exploring general principles and contrasting them with strategies and application. Now we're in continuation of that conversation. Today we're going to look at um, the principles behind how the human experience is created, or how every experience that we have as human beings are created, and why it's important to understand how it works. Because when you see how something works, it is more empowering than you could ever imagine, because it's then you are in a better position to decide how to do what you want to do or what applications to use. But it's not what we're used to, so to say, because more of what we find in kind of personal development or in every sphere of life, we have everyone throwing out his or her own version of strategies or applications that have worked for them and may or may not work for you. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning strategies or learning applications that other people have used. They can turn out to be quite useful. But what we're pointing to is seeing beyond the applications to actually see how it works, or the principles behind the whole process, or the mechanics behind it. Because once you see that, then it puts you in a position to also come up with your own applications and strategies and whatever makes sense to you in the moment. So basically, that's like an overview of what we'll be looking at in this session, this episode.
Yep. And, it's important to note that what we're going to do over time is give you some tools, and you're going to have this big old toolbox. And they're not instructions, and toolboxes are different for everybody. George and I were discussing how his project, he's building something different than I'm building, and you're going to build something different than the both of us are building. So you may need different tools to make it work. And at least you'll have the tools and you'll know which ones work best for you. And that's what we're hoping to do here, is provide you with some sort of information that will help you point to what you need when you need it. So how can we elaborate on that, George?
Okay, so I think it's in order to contrast, how the impact of understanding how something works. There is, I'll use a metaphor of, or a story of someone um, that was involved in or lived in a place that experienced an earthquake, for instance, and the person survived and moved to a different city that has historically never experienced an earthquake. So in his mind, this person felt safe because now, for all intents and purposes, there's no earthquake. An earthquake can't get him. Now, on his first night in New City, he woke up to some serious trembling, like the building was shaking, and there was some noise that kind of was reminiscent of what he went through during the earthquake. And the first thought that came to him was, oh, how come, how, what kind of coincidence? This city that has never had an earthquake, and my first night here already there's an earthquake, and it felt so real and all that. But by the following morning, he made some inquiries and found out that there was little or no there was actually no destruction. And he later realized that it was actually what he was hearing was the subway, which was almost underneath, almost directly underneath where the building he was staying was, and that was why he was hearing all that noise in the night. Now, as soon as he understood, he saw through that. He saw how, how it worked. Even though the situation was the same, there was still he still had more of the same experiences every night, but it didn't come with the experience of terror and fear, because now he understood how it works and what was causing that.
Yep.
Right? So that is more or less a way of trying to understand or trying to see the impact of understanding how something works, rather than if he was told that um, it's just whatever, without him realizing it for himself, he would probably be sleeping and waking up every night still scared, thinking he was involved in something terrible without knowing that it was something harmless and he didn't need to do anything. So, in the same way, in our lives, when we see how every experience we have is generated from within us via three universal principles that are unique, that are um, common to every human being, regardless of race, color, background, intellectual ability, or whatever we think differentiates or makes us different. And these three principles are articulated, simply as mind, consciousness, and thought. Now, those are just three words pointing to the fact that mind um, points to the fact that we are alive. There's life in us. We have this sense that there is something powering us. There's something that is that makes us different from someone in the graveyard. Like there's life flowing through our veins. There's life in us. Now, consciousness refers to the fact that we have the capacity. There is something within us that allows us to think, that helps us generate thoughts, not the thoughts that we have, not the individual thoughts. Think about it as the source of our thoughts, right? And consciousness, sorry, is awareness, the ability to be aware, to be conscious, the source of our awareness. While the principle of thought is the power within us that allows us to, or that generates the thoughts. So these three, principles or facts are universal. They apply to everybody, and they are at play whether we are conscious of them or not. Now, the only thing that is available, so to say, is for us to begin to increase our consciousness or become more aware, to realize what is really going on and how these things come together to create our experience of life.
Yep. And once you do become aware, it's sort of like going from having a flashlight in a very dark room to turning on the light and seeing everything for what it is. Before, you might have seen shapes and you thought they were different, and you open up and you see the light, and all of a sudden you realize, it's not what I thought it was. It's much more simple than that. So
Yeah,
once you see, you can't unsee. But the way you see is different from the way I see, the way George sees. So we
true.
might take these three principles of consciousness, mind, and thought and come from them from a very different, for lack of a better word, understanding. So there's really no blueprint. Everybody's room looks different.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know sometimes this conversation can sound um, a little bit over the head, but whatever you've seen, whatever you've heard that makes sense or doesn't make sense, or it's a conversation that is ongoing. It's a conversation that we are interested in, and we keep trying to deepen our understanding or realize it more for ourselves. So if there's anything you've heard that you'd like to hear more of, you can drop a comment, subscribe to the channel, or reach out to either Deanna or myself to keep the conversation going. And we'll keep exploring more and more of this as the weeks unfold.
As George said, we would welcome your feedback, and if there are things that you're not quite grasping, we're happy to go over them and come from them from a different way. A lot of times we use metaphor to explain because truthfully our language is limited, and to create this awareness, and I use the term loosely because you can use a different term for it and it would just be as correct. There's no wrong way or right way to do this. It's how it works for you. So keep coming back, keep asking questions. We will check the comments regularly and we will alter conversations as we need to. Thank you for listening, and next week we'll continue our conversation. Thank
Yeah.
you, George.
Thank you. Bye bye.